All right, rewatchers, we've hit that time portal and we are ready for another retro rewatch. Today we have got another hot watch. I think this is maybe the third or fourth one. So today we're going to be talking about a horror movie. The last two we talked about were Dominique and War Horse One, both action movies. Today we're going to talk about a horror film from 2021, I believe. Um, it is the Deep House. All right. So what the basic gist of the Deep House is it's kind of like a haunted house ghost story, which I love. Those are usually my favorite kind of horror movies, both ghost stories and possession, like The Exorcist or something along those lines. And so the Deep House is really unique because it is essentially a found footage film where you've got this couple who have a YouTube channel where they go to haunted places and they investigate and they shoot videos and yada yada. I think that's a pretty common setup for stuff, kind of like Deadstream, things like that. Which Deadstream is really good. That would be a good one to do a hot watch on sometime. But back to the point. So the Deep House is this couple where they are going to France to go find this sunken hidden house that the male character has found out. I think his name is David, if I remember correctly. Ben. Um, and so anyway, so they go to France and they find someone to take them to the house. And from there, they get on their dive gear and they go underwater and they go to investigate the house. And it's really good. It has a lot of practical effects. It's got some really good jump scares. And the fact that they're underwater just adds a whole nother element, almost kind of like gravity being out in space, where it's like you almost feel a suffocating feeling that they're trapped. Not only are they trapped, in a potential haunted house, but they're also trapped underwater. And so there's a lot, spoilers ahead, there's a lot that goes on. Like, for instance, they find a way to enter the house. And then at some point in time, they've explored, they decide, okay, it's time to go. We're starting to get low on oxygen and they can't get out. The way that they went in is not the way out. And so they've gone through this massive, really in some ways beautiful house underwater and explored, and they have found like family members that have drowned, sunken under the water, that are chained in. They've had visions of persecution that families have had, and just stuff kind of along those lines. And in fact, the family has a motto that's kind of written on like some shields or like above a door. I can't remember which, but the French translation of it is actually H.P. Lovecraft. And so I don't butcher it, I'm actually going to read it. Um, so the H.P. Lovecraft quote is from The Call of Cthulhu: "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die." And so there's really kind of some implications that has of what we're going to find with this house, in that while the family may be dead, the house may be dead and drowned. It's not. There's still very much alive spiritual things under there, and the way that that happens is just really unique, and it's very inventive, and it's very well thought out. And because I'm not going to say there's not any CGI in it. I'm sure there is, but the high majority of it is practical. They built this house, like the house and the floors, in like this, like the biggest water sound stage or pool or whatever that they could find. And they actually had these hydraulics that could raise and lower the house through the water. So, like, whenever they were in certain levels of the house, they were always underwater, and they could kind of raise and lower it, where the film crew could be around and could film what was going on. And that was absolutely incredible. And because of that, that made it feel more realistic because it was real. And I mean, the actors were really diving. And now I will mention, I myself am a diver, and these people would have died long before the end of this movie if it was for real, just because they're 100 feet down and they stay underwater way, way longer than you can. before you start getting the bends where you start getting nitrogen in your blood. And at one point in time you have an ascent, and that ascent is also way too fast where your lungs would expand and explode. And just not giving it away, but there's also an after credit sequence that's important and has bearing um, on the movie that you definitely want to stick around and make sure that you watch. Um, I will say that there is an implication at the end of the movie with something in the water that it seems like some people witness without actually seeing it, but just kind of their reaction. So trying not to give too much away, but just saying that is something that happens. Now let's talk about this actual release because it's actually a German 4K that I was able to get, and it was absolutely beautiful. Now, unlike Dominique, where there was a lot of issues with translation and subtitles and stuff like that, that was not an issue with this one at all. They were in France, and there was definitely French being spoken. But I think there might have actually been English subtitles in this one. Yes, there are. So I was unlike in Dominique, where I could only turn on German subtitles. In this one, I could turn on English subtitles, so it was still able to work for me. And most of the German content that I get, that is the case. But it's only been on a couple that I've had that be an issue. But just bear in mind if you're going to be ordering stuff from around the world and English is not their first spoken language, that's something that you can run into. Um, I don't know the director of this. As far as if he's done anything else, I believe this is a film that was on Shutter. It's an XYZ film. I know that, which is a lot of XY and RLJE. Like a lot of those movies wind up going to Shutter. But this is something that again, I don't think there's any way to get this on physical media except for this way. Um, so if streaming's the way you do it, then I think that's where you're going to look. And I think it is on Shutter the last time I checked. I don't know if it still is or not. Um, the aggregate score, since we have talked about that on the other films, is a 5.3. So it's actually pretty similar to the other films. And that's not particularly high, although I will say this, horror movies in general get much lower ratings than other films of its average of its type. I think a lot of times you could add anywhere from 1 to 2 points on a horror film, and that would be on the same level of another film, like an action movie or a comedy or something like that. I feel like, as a general rule, like you can have horror movies that are absolutely fantastic, and they still will not have like eights and super high sevens and stuff like that. I mean, you'll have stuff like The Exorcist and probably The Substance, although I think The Substance is actually somewhere in like the 60s. Let's look that up just out of curiosity. So it's a 7.3. So that's pretty good. That's pretty high for a horror film. And that's an instant classic. If you haven't seen The Substance, definitely go watch that. But The Deep House is very good in its own right. It's very amazing to see a horror film with practical effects and be so eerie and dark. And of course, in the water, it's very blue, so it's got a very specific color palette. I will say on one thing about the 4K or Blu-ray is there's some deleted scenes on it. And there is one deleted scene that involves a mirror, and it's a practical effect that, man, it has just a phenomenal jump scare, very well shot. And I honestly don't know why it wasn't in the film because it wasn't super long and it kind of went with the motif of what was going on at the time. So I don't know why they cut that because it worked really well. But it would be neat to have the physical media and watch that deleted scene. That deleted scene may be on YouTube or something as well. I'm not sure. But that is definitely something that you would miss streaming, like if you were to watch it on Shutter. So that's it. That's the Deep House. That's another hot shot done. We're going to hit the rewind button and get to the video store, and we will see you next time.